There is a strange and haunting sight standing quietly in the middle of the English countryside. Some people say it looks like a ghost made of stone, a ghost worth more than 200 million. It is not a ruined castle, and it is not an ancient fortress falling apart. Instead, it is a huge palace with tall walls, grand windows, long hallways, and rooms once filled with priceless treasures. But today, many of its windows are boarded up. The grand halls that once welcomed kings, queens, and leaders now stand empty, filled only with shadows, silence, and the smell of damp air. This place is known as Mentmore Towers, and even in its abandoned state, it feels powerful and overwhelming. If someone walks up the old driveway and listens closely, it almost feels like the building holds memories inside its walls. Some visitors say they imagine hearing the distant echo of a party so loud and so glamorous that people talked about it for decades afterward. But that same echo also carries the sound of something darker. The greatest cultural disappointment in British history, a moment when the country lost a treasure it could have easily saved. How could such a tragedy happen? How could a palace built by one of the richest families on earth, the legendary Rothschilds, end up empty, forgotten, and sinking into decay? Why did the British government allow one of the world's most valuable private art collections to be broken apart and sold? People once called the collection the Private Louvre, meaning it was as impressive as the famous museum in Paris. Yet today, Mentmore stands like an unwanted toy, abandoned in a field. The story behind this fall is not only about bricks, gold, or artwork. It is about ambition, pride, class struggles, politics, love, grief, and a misunderstanding that lasted over a century. It is the story of how one man tried to create a perfect world inside a mansion, only for that dream to collide with the cold rules of a much harsher time. And the surprising part is that the hero at the center of this dramatic tale was not a king, a warrior, or a powerful ruler. It was a quiet man named Baron Meyer de Rothschild. In 1850, Baron Meyer had a reputation that confused even his own famous family. The Rothschilds were known everywhere as brilliant bankers who controlled huge amounts of money, influenced governments, financed wars, and built railroads that changed entire countries. But Meyer was the odd one out. While his brothers and cousins were focused on business, investments, and political influence, Meyer cared about something completely different. He did not want to spend his life studying numbers in ledgers or signing banking agreements in London offices. What he wanted was beauty. What he loved was speed. What he dreamed about was creating something that the world had never seen before. People often said Meyer felt more comfortable sitting on a racehorse than sitting behind a banker's desk. He enjoyed art, sports, horses, luxury, and the feeling of fresh air more than business meetings. He was born into incredible wealth, so much wealth that he never needed to earn a single pound. But money itself was not enough for him. He wanted to build something meaningful, something breathtaking, something that would make even the strict English aristocrats stare in silence. These aristocrats had looked down on the Rothschilds for years. Even though the family was richer than many monarchs, old English noble families believed that money alone could not buy true acceptance. In Victorian society, people cared deeply about origin, meaning where your ancestors came from. To these nobles, the Rothschilds were outsiders, too wealthy, too powerful, and Jewish in a country where being Jewish meant facing prejudice. People invited them to parties, borrowed money from them, and admired their success, but they still whispered behind their backs. Meyer understood these invisible walls very clearly. He knew that no matter how rich his family was, the aristocrats would never fully welcome them. But instead of hiding or trying to change himself, he chose a daring strategy. He would build a palace so beautiful, so advanced, and so extraordinary that no one could ignore it. Wealthy families built estates to show their heritage. Meyer planned to build an estate to rewrite his family's place in history. He did not want just a house. He wanted a statement, a declaration, a masterpiece. During that time, most English lords lived in gloomy and uncomfortable stone manors with cold hallways, smoky fireplaces, drafty rooms, and the smell of old carpets and wet dogs. These houses might have been ancient, but many were unpleasant to live in. Meyer wanted the opposite. He wanted his home to feel warm, bright, elegant, and modern. a mix of tradition and futuristic ideas that no one else had even considered. But to make his impossible dream come true, Meyer needed someone else who believed anything was possible. And that is where one of the story's biggest surprises begins. When England's richest man needed an architect to design his new palace, people expected him to hire a famous professional from the Royal Academy or one of the country's top designers. But Meyer did something shocking. Instead of choosing a traditional architect, he chose a gardener, Joseph Paxton. But Paxton was no ordinary gardener. He was already known for designing the famous Crystal Palace, a huge glass building made for the Great Exhibition of 1851. Still, his heart always belonged to the world of greenhouses, light, plants, and glass. And because of that, he understood space and sunlight better than anyone else in Europe. That was exactly what Meyer wanted: light, space, beauty, innovation. By hiring Paxton, he was placing stone, marble, and gold into the hands of a man who normally shaped glass and air. And this daring choice created one of the most spectacular homes Europe had ever seen. One of Paxton's boldest ideas was a massive glass roof placed in the center of the home, an idea so unusual that people laughed at it. But that glass roof became the symbol of Mentmore itself: transparency, brilliance, and fragility. Everything that made the house beautiful also made its future uncertain. To understand why this masterpiece eventually fell apart, we must go back to the beginning of Meyer's life. Born in 1818, Meyer Amschild de Rothschild entered a world where his family name already stood for unmatched financial influence. The Rothschilds were wealthier than some royal families, but in England, money could not replace old tradition. Families who traced their ancestry back to knights who came with William. The conqueror looked down on newcomers, even wealthy ones. No matter how polite people were to Meyer, he always knew he did not fully belong. His family could donate to charities, host parties, or buy enormous estates. Yet the nobles still saw them as outsiders. Most people in his position would have reacted in one of two ways. They might have changed themselves to fit in, copying aristocratic habits, or they might have withdrawn and stayed only among their own community. But Meyer chose a third option. He decided he would build a world where the old rules did not matter, a world so beautiful that even the coldest aristocrats would have to respect it. His mind was a mix of imagination and strategic thinking. Unlike his father, Nathan Rothschild, who spent long days buried in business and banking, Meyer preferred to act like a gentleman artist. He knew that in upper-class England, two things opened doors faster than money: fine art and fox hunting. So instead of building banks, he built invitations to a new kind of luxury. Beginning in 1850, he bought land across Buckinghamshire. He chose this location with careful precision. It was one of the best fox hunting regions in the country, located only about 40 miles from London. This meant wealthy lords could easily travel to his estate for hunts, parties, and gatherings. Once they arrived, they would see the brilliance of his home, meet his family, and begin accepting the Rothschilds into their social world. At the same time, other Rothschild relatives also purchased nearby estates. Slowly, the entire region transformed into what people jokingly called Rothschildshire, an area filled with luxury, gardens, art, and magnificent mansions. But Meyer still wanted something more. Land was not enough. He needed a palace that would amaze everyone. A palace that would smell not of dust and damp air, but of perfume, fresh wood, and the promise of a new century. Victorian architects loved Gothic style, with its dark shapes, towers, and heavy stone designs. But Meyer hated it. He didn't want a gloomy home. He looked toward the Renaissance, toward the sun-filled palaces of Italy and the elegant chateaux of France. He wanted to bring the feeling of warm southern light into rainy England. This vision led him to Joseph Paxton, the perfect partner for such a dream. Many aristocrats mocked the idea. A gardener building a palace? But Meyer ignored them. He granted Paxton unlimited creative freedom and a massive budget. If something needed gold, it received gold. If something needed velvet, it had the richest velvet money could buy. And if a room needed furniture, it had furniture once owned by real European royalty. This was the birth of a new artistic style people would later call Le Goût Rothschild, the Rothschild taste. It meant luxury without holding back, It meant bold colors, gold accents, rare antiques, and designs that looked like they belonged to kings. But behind all this beauty was a silent struggle. Meyer built Mentmore not just for comfort, but as a shield for his family, a place where they could belong, away from prejudice. He believed that if he built the walls strong enough and filled the rooms with priceless treasures, the house would last forever. He believed art and beauty could protect his legacy. He was wrong, but he could not know that yet. By 1852, he owned the land, the funds, and the designs. Everything was ready, except for one thing: a family that would continue the legacy. And soon, the story of Mentmore would take a dramatic turn that even Meyer could not have predicted. The marriage that transformed Mentmore forever. As the walls of Mentmore rose higher and the rooms filled with rich materials from across Europe, Baron Meyer allowed himself to believe he had finally created the perfect world he dreamed of. But fate had a different plan. Even before the paint on the palace walls had dried, the future of the estate would take a direction he never expected. In 1874, Mayor Amschel de Rothschild died. His death stopped the entire energy of the estate, like a sudden gust of wind blowing out a bright flame. The man who had imagined Mentmore, who had filled it with light, art, and innovation, never lived long enough to fully enjoy the paradise he built. But the greatest twist came from his personal life. He had no sons. He had only one child, a daughter named Hannah. And suddenly, at just 23 years old, Hannah de Rothschild became the richest young woman in all of Europe. Her inheritance was so enormous that newspapers could not even calculate it. They called her the most desirable bride in England. Yet, at the same time, people whispered quietly that no matter how many millions she owned, money could not wash away her family's outsider status. Even with all her wealth, she carried the weight of prejudice the Rothschilds faced for generations. Mentmore, the giant palace built by her father, now belonged entirely to her. The house waited for her direction, but instead of becoming a peaceful home, it quickly became a golden cage, a beautiful place that felt too large and too lonely for a single young woman. But fate was preparing another turning point, one that would change not only Hannah's life, but the entire meaning of Mentmore. This change arrived in the form of a man named Archibald Primrose, the 5th Earl of Rosebery. If the Rothschilds represented the new power of global finance, the Roseberys represented old, established British aristocracy. Their family history stretched far back into the centuries, filled with noblemen, generals, and political leaders. Archibald, often called Archie, was 28 years old when he met Hannah. He was charming, intelligent, athletic, extremely well-educated, and had the reputation of someone born to lead. But behind his impressive appearance, he had a sensitive and complicated personality. He carried an emotional heaviness that people around him sometimes noticed but did not fully understand. Still, he had ambition burning inside him, ambition so strong that it shaped the course of his entire life. There is a famous story about Archibald during his school years at Eton. According to legend, he once listed 3 goals he wanted to achieve in life: to marry the richest woman in England, to win the Derby, the most important horse race in the country, to become Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Most people laughed when they heard this. How could one man achieve all 3? It sounded impossible, even childish. But no one knew that this impossible list would come true. Every single item. The meeting between Hannah and Archibald was not like a romantic story from a fairy tale book. It was more like 2 powerful worlds crashing into each other. Their marriage was not only a love story, it was a historic alliance. For Archibald, marrying a Rothschild was a bold and risky move. Many of his aristocratic friends told him not to do it. They believed that marrying into a Jewish banking family would lower his social standing. They whispered and sneered behind his back. But Archibald, who had always walked his own path, refused to listen to them. For Hannah, the marriage offered something even her father's wealth could not buy: a place in the highest circle of British society. For years, the Rothschilds had lived in the shadow of old families, but by marrying into the Rosebery line, she would step into the heart of the aristocracy. Mentmore would no longer just be a palace of wealth. It would become a palace of political influence. Their wedding in 1878 became the major social event of the entire decade. The Prince of Wales, the man who would later become King Edward VII, attended the ceremony. His presence sent a loud and clear message across Britain. The Rothschilds are now accepted. With that moment, Mentmore changed forever. What once was a rich man's dream home, now transformed into a symbol of political power. The marriage united two mighty forces, old aristocratic influence and new financial strength. And Mentmore stood at the center of this historic combination. The architecture of Mentmore perfectly reflected this new union, even though it had been designed long before the couple met. From the outside, the house looked like a tribute to traditional English heritage. The silhouette resembled the classic Elizabethan mansions of the 16th century, tall, proud, and decorated with beautiful stone carvings. This represented Archibald's world, heritage, nobility, and centuries of tradition. But inside the house, a different world waited. The world of the Rothschilds. Here the rooms glowed with bright colors, gold decorations, rare paintings, and furniture rescued from the palaces of Europe. Hidden inside the old stone exterior was a modern paradise built with advanced engineering, exotic decor, and breathtaking beauty. Each room whispered the dreams of Baron Meyer, who wanted the future and the past to live together under one roof. Visitors approaching Mentmore expected darkness. They expected the interior of a typical Victorian mansion, dim halls, low ceilings, and flickering candlelight. But instead, when they stepped inside the grand entrance, they were stunned. The house burst with brightness. Joseph Paxton, the genius gardener turned architect, had done the unthinkable. He created an enormous central courtyard and covered it with a giant glass roof. This heart of the home was called the Grand Hall, and it became the most impressive part of Mentmore Towers. It measured an astonishing 48 by 40 feet, almost the size of a small indoor park. Light poured through the glass, illuminating everything below with a soft, natural glow. Imagine walking inside and looking up to see the sky through glass, even on a rainy day. This design shocked visitors. They had never seen a home with such a feature. The Grand Hall was not just a room. It was a stage, a performance in architecture. Standing inside it felt like standing in a palace built from sunlight. The contrast between the old and the new was dramatic. Ancient armor and tapestries decorated the hall, showing off the long history of European nobility. But these pieces were illuminated not by candles, but by clear daylight from above. Tradition and modern technology stood side by side in perfect harmony. The union of Hannah and Archibald breathed fresh life into the estate. There were glamorous dinners, important political meetings, and cultural events held under Paxton's glass ceiling. Wealthy families, dukes, politicians, and leaders walked through the hall, amazed by what they saw. Among the palm trees planted indoors, another one of Paxton's greenhouse-inspired ideas, powerful men discussed the future of the British Empire. The house became a stage for decisions that shaped world history. But behind this brilliance, a quiet conflict began to grow. Although Archibald truly loved Hannah, he felt uncomfortable living in a house that screamed extraordinary wealth. Wealth that was not from his own family. The bold, extravagant style of the interior sometimes bothered him. He admired the artwork and treasures, but the overwhelming richness clashed with his personal preference for simplicity and restraint. This discomfort was small at first, barely noticeable, like a thin crack in a great stone wall, but it was the beginning of something larger. During the 1880s, Mentmore reached the highest point of its glory. The estate seemed unstoppable, a perfect blend of money and influence. It felt like nothing could ever endanger such a masterpiece. But the very features that made Mentmore magnificent were also the seeds of its future downfall. The enormous open spaces, the huge rooms, and the advanced features all required vast amounts of money to maintain. Heating the massive halls was incredibly expensive. Keeping the glass roofs repaired cost more than many families earned in a year, and the staff required to operate the estate was enormous. But at that time, no one worried. Laughter echoed across the halls, music filled the rooms. Guests danced under the glass roof as the future looked bright. To walk into Mentmore during its golden age felt like stepping into the most magnificent jewelry box ever created. It was not a simple mansion, it was a symbol. The grand hall was the glowing heart of the palace. Sunshine filtered through Paxton's daring ceiling, creating a warm glow that made even the cold English winter feel far away. The air inside the hall smelled of exotic flowers, polished wood, and luxurious fabrics. The scent alone told visitors they were standing in a place of absolute power and confidence. The estate was filled with masterpieces. The dining room walls displayed real 18th century gilded panels rescued from a famous Parisian hotel. Guests literally ate inside French history. Furniture once owned by Queen Marie Antoinette rested casually in corners, as if it were ordinary household decor. Enormous paintings hung on the walls, unique porcelain pieces sat on shelves. A gigantic marble fireplace, believed to have been designed by the artist Rubens, dominated one room. Servants burned whole tree trunks inside it to heat the huge space. Every mirror, every vase, every chair was placed to create balance, beauty, and an overwhelming sense of grand luxury. It took an army of 80 servants to keep everything perfect. They polished the gold, dusted the tapestries, maintained the porcelain collections, and kept the fires burning day and night. From the outside, Mentmore looked indestructible, but inside, the house was already beginning to struggle under the weight of its own perfection. It was simply too big, too detailed, and too expensive to maintain forever. But no one understood this yet, not until tragedy struck. The death that froze. Mentmore in time, even as Mentmore dazzled guests and impressed anyone who stepped inside, a quiet truth lingered beneath the surface. The estate's future rested heavily on the happiness and stability of the family who lived there. And in the middle of that life stood Hannah de Rothschild, the woman who connected the unimaginable wealth of the Rothschilds with the noble heritage of the Rosebery family. But in the autumn of 1890, everything changed in a single devastating moment. In November of that year, an invisible danger crept into Mentmore. It was not a fire, not a financial disaster, and not a political crisis. It was something far more silent and far more cruel: typhoid fever. This illness, which spread easily through contaminated water or food, struck quickly and mercilessly. On November 19, 1890, Hannah de Rothschild, the bright heart of Mentmore Towers, died at only 39 years old. Her death fell over the house like a heavy shadow. The music stopped, the laughter disappeared. The light from Paxton's famous glass ceiling seemed colder. The estate that had once felt alive and warm now felt hollow and shaken. For Archibald Primrose, Hannah's death was more than losing a wife. It was losing a partner, a supporter, and the only person who truly understood the weight he carried as both a politician and a man. Their marriage had united two powerful families, but it had also created something simpler and more meaningful: a home. Without Hannah, the emotional center of Mentmore collapsed. Ironically, it was after this terrible loss that Archibald reached the highest point of his public career. In 1894, he became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, fulfilling the third goal he had set for himself years earlier as a young student. But the victory felt cold and empty. People around him noticed his sadness. Some described him as the loneliest and most unhappy man ever to hold this office. The great halls of Mentmore, which once echoed with political debates and glowing parties, now echoed with silence. Everything inside the estate reminded Archibald of Hannah: her voice, her taste in art, her warmth, her dreams. Walking through the rooms felt like walking through memories he couldn't escape. In his grief, Archibald made a decision that would have enormous consequences for the estate's future. He ordered that nothing in the house should be changed, nothing moved, nothing replaced, nothing updated. It was as if he believed that keeping Mentmore exactly as it was would keep Hannah's spirit alive inside it. Hannah's rooms were sealed, her unfinished letters remained on her writing desk, and her clothes stayed hanging in the wardrobe, untouched, as if she had stepped out for a short walk and would return at any moment. Servants polished furniture that no one used anymore. They dusted decorations no one looked at. They kept fires burning for a woman who would never come home again. The mansion, once a shining example of Victorian progress, became frozen in time. It transformed from a lively home into a museum of grief. But this decision had serious long-term effects. The world outside Mentmore was changing quickly. New technologies appeared. Cars replaced horses. Telephones spread across cities. Taxes increased. Social systems changed. But Mentmore stayed stuck in 1890, untouched, unmoving, and refusing to adapt to the world around it. By refusing modernization, Archibald unknowingly created a heavy financial burden for future generations. The house became enormously expensive to maintain. Heating the grand hall, repairing the massive windows, maintaining the gardens, and protecting the art collection cost a fortune. What had once been a symbol of wealth and pride was slowly turning into a financial trap. Yet, for decades after Hannah's death, the house remained beautifully preserved. Visitors felt as if they were stepping into a time capsule. Even though the world outside had changed, Mentmore continued to glow with the same elegance it had in the 1880s. But inside this beauty, a quiet decay began. The paint flaked, the pipes aged, the glass roof cracked, and the fabric started to fade. The servants tried their best, but the house was simply too big for any staff to maintain perfectly without constant upgrades. Upgrades Archibald refused to allow. Meanwhile, the family line continued. The couple's son, Harry Primrose, eventually inherited the estate. He loved Mentmore, but he also understood the burden it placed on the family. The world was now in the 20th century, a time of rapid technological advances, world wars, and major changes in society. Britain was no longer the empire it once was, and maintaining gigantic estates had become extremely difficult. Still, the family managed to keep Mentmore alive, even if just barely. They continued protecting the art collection and preserving the estate's original design as much as they could. But the cost of this preservation grew heavier each year, like a weight pressing down on the family's shoulders. The cracks became deeper, the taxes became higher, the world became harsher. Then came the moment in history that sealed Mentmore's fate, the 1970s. In 1974, Harry Primrose, the 6th Earl of Rosebery, passed away. With his death came a devastating financial blow to the entire family: inheritance tax. At that time, British inheritance taxes could reach as high as 75% of the value of large estates. This law was designed to prevent the rich from passing massive wealth through generations without contributing to the nation. But in cases like Mentmore, it created a nearly impossible challenge. The new heir, Lord Neil Primrose, suddenly found himself facing a massive tax bill, one so enormous it was almost the same value as the entire property. He had two choices: sell the house itself, or sell the priceless art and antiques inside it. He tried to save both, but he was forced to make a heartbreaking decision. Believing Mentmore was too important to lose, he tried to save the entire estate, house, park, and collection, by offering it to the British government for $2 million. This offer was unbelievably generous, far lower than the true value. Sir Roy Strong, the respected director of the Victoria and Albert Museum, urgently begged the government to accept. He warned that Mentmore held the most important collection of decorative art still in private hands. Other countries protected their historic estates. France saved its great palaces. Italy preserved its villas. Even smaller nations proudly protected their heritage. But in Britain, something shocking happened. The government refused the offer. They said the country was struggling with inflation, worker strikes, and economic difficulties. They said there was no money for the toys of the rich. They said the heritage of the Rothschilds was not a national priority. And with that refusal, the slow tragedy that began with Hannah's death finally reached its breaking point. Facing an impossible tax bill, Lord Neil Primrose had only one option left: to sell the collection that his family had carefully built for more than a century. The sale would take place inside Mentmore itself, inside the Grand Hall, under Paxton's once glorious glass ceiling. People called it the sale of the century. When the auction was announced, visitors from across the world traveled to see it. Art dealers, collectors, museum representatives, and curious onlookers filled the estate. But this time, they did not come to admire the beauty of Mentmore. They came to break it apart. For 10 days, the rooms echoed with the sound of the auctioneer's hammer. Priceless treasures, objects that had once belonged to queens, kings, and noble families, were carried out in boxes. The collection, carefully created to be unified and complete, was torn apart piece by piece. Marie Antoinette's furniture, the Rubens-designed fireplace, Sèvres porcelain, Gainsborough paintings, Rothschild silver and gold, French gilded panels, everything was sold. Mentmore, once a proud symbol of beauty, became the stage for its own dismantling. Journalists described the event as painful, like watching a magnificent creature being taken apart while still alive. By the end of the auction, more than $6 million had been raised, triple the amount the family had asked from the government. The walls stayed, but the heart of the house was gone. Mentmore had become what it was never meant to be, an empty shell. And the future that awaited it was even more tragic. The empty palace and the struggle to save it. When the last crate was loaded onto the final truck and taken away from Mentmore, a terrible silence settled over the estate. The rooms that once glowed with golden light now felt hollow, stripped, and wounded. For the first time in over 100 years, Mentmore was no longer a home, nor a symbol of power, nor even a museum of beauty. It was simply an empty building, a shell made of stone, glass, and memories. The walls still stood tall, the towers were still mighty, the grand staircase still curved upward like a frozen wave. But something important had disappeared forever: the soul of the house. Every room had once held treasures chosen with care by Baron Meyer de Rothschild, then cherished by Hannah and preserved with sadness by Archibald. Each object had been part of a story of ambition, pride, love, and loss. Once removed, the rooms seemed to lose their meaning. The grand hall, once filled with the glow of daylight, now felt too large, too empty, and too silent. The British public realized too late what had been lost. Museums wrote articles, newspapers ran editorials. Historians called the government's refusal one of the greatest cultural mistakes of the 20th century. But the decision could not be undone. The collection was scattered across the world. Some pieces went to museums in America. Others disappeared into private homes. A few resurfaced at later auctions. Most were never seen together again. For the Roseberry family, the sale had been painful but necessary. They saved themselves from financial ruin, but the victory came at a high emotional cost. Mentmore now felt like a shadow of its former self. The walls that once reflected pride now seemed to echo with regret. But the story did not end with the sale. Mentmore still existed as a building, and that meant it still needed someone to take care of it. After the auction, the estate briefly passed into new hands. The first buyer was a surprising and unusual figure, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the spiritual teacher who became famous in the 1960s for teaching transcendental meditation and for being associated with the Beatles. People wondered why he wanted Mentmore. Some believed he wanted to turn it into a meditation center. Others thought it might become a retreat for spiritual groups. But whatever his plans were, they never fully came to life. The house remained mostly unused, the rooms still empty, and the renovations too expensive to handle. Years passed. The Maharishi's group eventually let go of the property. Another buyer stepped forward, a billionaire named Simon Halaby, one of the richest men in Britain during the early 2000s. He had a bold and ambitious plan to turn Mentmore into one of the world's first 6-star hotels. The idea sounded promising. A 6-star hotel inside a Victorian palace would attract wealthy guests, celebrities, and travelers from all over the world. But turning such a huge, delicate building into a hotel would require millions of pounds in restoration. Halaby began planning renovations, but his real estate empire collapsed during the financial crisis of 2008. Suddenly, the man who owned Mentmore could no longer afford to save it. Once again, the palace was abandoned. It almost felt as if Mentmore rejected every new owner, as if the house refused to belong to anyone but the people who built it, Meyer, Hannah, and Archibald, as if it waited for someone who understood its true meaning, but no such person came. Each year, the condition of the estate became more alarming. Paxton's famous glass roof began to leak. Rain dripped into the grand hall, staining the floors and damaging the walls. The once perfect winter garden, with palm trees, warm sunlight, and exotic plants now looked wild and forgotten. Moss grew in corners, paint peeled from the ceilings. The smell of dampness, once unimaginable in Meyer's futuristic home, spread through the corridors. The old heating systems rusted, the carpets rotted, the marble lost its shine, and with every storm, the house weakened a little more. Slowly, Mentmore Towers began appearing on a terrible list, the Heritage at Risk Register. This list includes historic buildings in danger of collapsing or being permanently damaged. The idea that one of England's grandest mansions, a house built by the richest man in the world and once offered to the government, could fall into ruin shocked many people. Yet, nothing changed. No organization bought the estate. No rescue plan succeeded. Mentmore remained caught between memory and neglect. Ironically, even as the real house decayed, millions of people around the world saw Mentmore on screen without realizing it. Hollywood directors discovered that its empty rooms and faded beauty created the perfect atmosphere for movies. One of the most notable films to use Mentmore was Batman Begins, directed by Christopher Nolan. The mansion stood in for Wayne Manor, the home of Bruce Wayne, the wealthy hero who hides behind the mask of Batman. The choice was fitting. Like Bruce Wayne himself, Mentmore was a place filled with shadows, sadness, and memories of a lost family. Another famous director, Stanley Kubrick, used Mentmore for scenes in his mysterious film, Eyes Wide Shut. Kubrick was known for his love of symbolism and hidden meaning. In Mentmore, he found exactly what he needed, a place that looked glamorous on the outside, but carried a haunting emptiness inside. Hollywood understood what historians had long said. Mentmore was beautiful, but lonely, impressive, but empty, majestic, but broken. Its appearance in films turned it into a symbol of forgotten wealth, abandoned dreams, and the thin line between power and emptiness. As more years passed, the house began to feel almost ghostly. The once solid walls seemed tired, the gardens turned wild, birds nested inside the roof. Wind whistled through broken window frames. The grand halls that once hosted kings now echoed with nothing but the sound of dripping water. The tragedy of Mentmore is not just the beauty that was lost, it is the message behind the loss. Heritage is fragile. Even the strongest walls can fall. Even the richest families can fade. Even the most magnificent collections can vanish in days. The decline of Mentmore is a warning about what happens when society forgets the value of history. In the 1970s, the government saved $2 million by refusing to buy the house and collection. But today, the loss is measured not in millions, but in something far greater, the cultural heritage that can never be replaced. A Marie Antoinette desk inside Mentmore was not just a desk, it was a story. A Rubens-designed fireplace inside Mentmore was not just decoration, it was a piece of European memory. Sèvres porcelain in Mentmore was not just porcelain, it was part of a world built with intention and meaning. When these objects were sold separately, their collective story disappeared. Museums can display them, but they cannot recreate the atmosphere, the harmony, the intentional beauty that once filled those rooms. By the time the public realized what Mentmore represented, it was too late. The estate stood empty, a giant monument to human short-sightedness. And yet, something strange happened. Even in its ruined state, Mentmore continued to inspire wonder. People felt drawn to it. Photographers came to capture the peeling paint. Historians wrote articles about its tragic fate. Urban explorers walked quietly through the halls, amazed by its silent grandeur. Some said Mentmore looked like a sleeping giant. Others said it looked like a kingdom cursed by time itself. But everyone agreed on one thing: Mentmore was too important to forget. But remembering is not enough. To save a building like Mentmore, the world must act. And it must act soon. Because the most fragile part of a palace is not the glass ceiling. It is the belief that the palace will save itself. The final lesson of Mentmore: a palace waiting for someone to remember. Today, Mentmore Towers stands in the quiet countryside like a stranded ship left on the shore of history. Its grand shape still rises proudly above the fields, and from far away, it still looks like a palace built for kings. But when you get closer, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. The famous glass roof leaks, wooden floors have warped, paint peels from walls that once held priceless art. Many windows are boarded up, and a deep silence hangs over the estate, as if the building itself is holding its breath. Mentmore is still magnificent, but it is also clearly wounded. After the sale of the century in the 1970s, the house went through a strange journey of owners, dreams, and disappointments. First, the Maharishi spiritual group held it. Then billionaire Simon Halabi tried to turn it into a 6-star hotel. But every plan fell apart. Loans collapsed. Investors backed out. The cost of repairing the house kept rising. It was as if Mentmore rejected all these new futures, like a stubborn guardian refusing to let anyone rewrite its story. Many people believe that Mentmore has a kind of personality, a spirit shaped by the people who once lived inside it. Baron Meyer, Hannah, and Archibald each left emotional footprints on the estate. Some places carry the energy of love and celebration. Others carry the echo of grief and longing. Mentmore feels like a house full of memories that refuse to leave. And yet, those memories are fading. Inside the grand hall, the once perfect glass roof now drips water during storms. The elegant stone carvings on the outside have begun to crack. The wind whistles through empty halls where music once played for dukes, princes, artists, and political leaders. The gardens grow wild, swallowing parts of the pathways. In the quietest rooms, dust lies thick on the floors, forming a blanket over the past. But the strangest thing is this: even as the real house decays, it has become more famous in modern culture than ever before. Hollywood directors use it as a symbol, not just for wealth, but for loneliness. When millions of people watched Batman Begins, they saw Bruce Wayne's mansion, not knowing it was Mentmore. When viewers watched Eyes Wide Shut, they saw Kubrick's mysterious scenes, not realizing the palace was Mentmore. These films chose the estate because of its mood. It is grand but empty, beautiful but broken, majestic but sad. In movies, Mentmore became exactly what it had become in real life, a stunning shell with a missing heart. Everyone who steps inside the estate today says the same thing. It does not feel dead. It feels paused, as if it is waiting for someone who understands its history, waiting for someone who believes it deserves more than slow decay, waiting for a story that honors what once was. But before talking about the future, we must face the truth of what happened. The tragedy of Mentmore is not just about a building. It is about a failure to protect memory. When the government refused to buy the estate and its treasures for $2 million, they believed they were saving money, but they did not understand what they were losing. A Marie Antoinette desk is valuable. A Rubens fireplace is valuable. A room filled with French gilded panels is valuable. But together, inside Mentmore, those pieces told a story of Europe, a story of art, culture, history, royalty, innovation, and ambition. Once removed, that story vanished. The objects still exist somewhere around the world, in museums, private collections, and estates. But without Mentmore, they have no connection to each other. They are puzzle pieces with no picture. And now, the same danger threatens the house itself. Because the truth is simple. A house lives only as long as people care about it, not as long as the walls stand, not as long as the roof stays up, not as long as tourists walk by, but as long as people remember why it matters. Mentmore was built as an answer to prejudice. It became a symbol of love and ambition. It transformed into a political powerhouse. It froze as a temple of grief. And finally, it became a warning about how easily beauty can disappear. In many ways, Mentmore reflects the story of every great mansion, every historic palace, every family legacy. Wealth cannot protect a home forever. Titles cannot protect a home forever. Even the strongest architecture cannot protect a home forever. Only meaning can. Only community can. Only memory can. A palace without people is just a building, but a building filled with memory becomes a legacy. This is why Mentmore's story feels so heavy. It is not simply the story of a house being abandoned. It is the story of society failing to protect something precious. The Rothschilds tried to share their masterpiece with the nation, offering it at a fraction of its value. But the offer was rejected. And now, the cost of ignoring Mentmore is far greater. Today, experts warn that repairing the estate might cost tens of millions of pounds. The glass roof alone would require a massive restoration project. The foundations need reinforcement. The interior needs careful conservation. And the gardens would require a team of dedicated professionals to restore them. Yet the question remains, who will take responsibility? Private owners have tried and failed. The government once refused and has shown little interest since. Heritage organizations struggle to secure the funds needed, and each year, the damage grows worse. But despite all of this, Mentmore still stands, proud, tall, and unforgettable. It stands because something inside it refuses to let go. It stands because history, even broken history, has a stubborn strength. People who visit often say that the house feels like it wants to be saved, as if it remembers the brightness of Paxton's glass roof, as if it remembers the scent of the grand parties, as if it remembers the soft presence of Hannah walking through the hallways, as if it remembers Meyer's ambition and Archibald's sorrow. Mentmore is a reminder that legacy is fragile, a reminder that beauty must be protected, a reminder that forgetting is the fastest path to destruction. But it is also a reminder of something hopeful. As long as someone remembers, restoration is possible. And that is the real power of telling its story. Your story, this documentary. Because documentaries do more than entertain. They give forgotten places a voice. They make people care again. They bring attention to the things history tries to hide. Mentmore may be damaged, it may be empty, it may be at risk. But it is not dead. Not yet. Not as long as its story continues to be told. And that is why this mansion, standing silent and alone in Buckinghamshire, still matters. It teaches us that neither money, nor titles, nor vast collections can guarantee immortality. It teaches us that even the strongest dreams can crumble if they are not protected. It teaches us that history does not survive on its own. We must choose to preserve it. When you look at Mentmore's boarded-up windows today, you are seeing more than broken glass or peeling paint. You are seeing a warning. You are seeing a lesson. You are seeing a reminder that greatness is temporary unless we fight for it. Sometimes the loudest message in history is not spoken by kings or written in books. Sometimes it is carried by a silent hallway, a darkened staircase, a door that no longer opens. Sometimes it is carried by a house that waits in the shadows, hoping someone will care enough to save it. Mentmore Towers stands today not as a symbol of failure, but as a call to remember. Because memory is the true foundation of every legacy. Because beauty is worth defending. Because no palace, no matter how grand, can survive without people who choose to protect it. And because the quietest sound in history is the echo inside an empty corridor where no one is left to turn on the light.